Hey everyone, and welcome to my sewing studio. This is basically where the magic happens, I guess. And in today's video, I am sewing myself a knit top. So I thought, why not take you along on this sewing day where I can share some of my favorite tips and techniques that I love to use when I'm sewing knit garments and tops in particular. And the pattern I'm using is the Gurli knit top, which is a pattern that I released earlier this year. As you can see here, it has puff sleeves. I'm wearing the long sleeve version right now. It has also cuffs. And today I'm actually doing the short sleeve version of the same pattern. And if you're curious about the Gurli top, you can of course check it out. Links to my pattern is in the description section of this video. And well, I think that's about it. Let's start sewing. Now the first thing we're going to do is to stabilize the shoulder seams. And if you don't stabilize the shoulders on stretch and knit fabrics, they will likely grow both during sewing and when you wear them. And today I'm using a very thin, lightweight, almost like a rib knit. So as you can see, it has a lot of stretch. There's no lycra in it either. That means that if I start sewing this, it will likely stretch out. So the finished shoulder seam will be longer than the pattern was designed for, which is a bit of a bummer. So you do need to stabilize them. And I've actually already done a video about all the ways you can stabilize the shoulder seam. So you can basically pick and choose whatever materials and techniques you like. What I'm using today is this. This is clear elastic, and I've actually set up my serger already for this. I'm actually going to attach the elastic together while I'm simultaneously sewing the shoulder seams, which you can usually do on a serger and on a sewing machine as well. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to sew everything in one continuous seam because I do love to sew efficiently. I do like to save time because sometimes, you know, sewing can be a bit monotonous. Sometimes I forget how to say English word, but you know what I mean. A bit of same. So if I can save a little bit of time here and there, I definitely like to optimize my workflow. So that's what we're going to do first. We're going to join the shoulder seams and at the same time also stabilizing them by using clear elastic. So this was quick, right? As you can see, I joined the shoulder seam and attached the clear elastic at the same time because there's a slot in my serger that makes it easier, but you can also just use your regular presser foot. It doesn't really matter. And the advantage of the clear elastic is, you can see, it's really nice and elastic. And I always stabilize the back piece of the garment because since I usually fold the shoulder seams towards the back, that means that the stabilizing interfacing or whatever material you're using will be hidden because it's folded towards the back. But if you're using like very sturdy material, maybe like self fabric, it might be better to use stabilize on the front. It depends on a lot of different factors. But you can make your own decision. But 9 out of 10 times I stabilize the back piece and then I fold the shoulder seam towards the back, which is basically the standard method what you can see when you look in the garment industry. But of course there's always exceptions, so you need to find whatever works best for you, but this is my preferred method. Now I'm going to press the shoulder seam, and I always press the shoulder seam towards the back, or I would say 9 out of 10 times. There are some who like to press the shoulder seams towards the front because it provides a slightly different look. The standard procedure in the garment industry, I would say, is generally to press it towards the back, but you will always find exceptions. So just go whatever you find works best for you. There is no rule about this. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to press the shoulder. And by the way, always use low heat when you are pressing knit fabrics because they tend to be quite delicate, especially if there is some synthetic in it, for instance, spandex or polyester. All these type of materials, they don't really do well with heat, nor does wool either. So yeah, there's a lot of reason to be very careful when you're pressing knit garments. Alright, now the next step after the shoulder seams should, in my opinion, always be attaching the neckband, because again, since knit fabrics has a tendency of growing, it's very important that you minimize every chance basically that the fabric has to grow, which means that if you start sewing the sleeves before you have attached the neckband, that means that you will fiddle a lot around with your garment, and every time you do that there's a risk that the fabric expands. So it's very important that you, as soon as the shoulder seams are done, you should always sew the neckband, because that way you will keep the neckline in check when you start working with all the other things that you're doing when you're sewing a knit top. And another thing that I always do is that I always place the seam of the neckband slightly behind the shoulder seam, because that means that there won't be any bumpy seams intersecting, which makes sewing them much easier, and also this seam will not be visible. I personally don't like the look of having the neckband at the behind, because if you're having short hair or your hair pulled up, this seam will be extremely visible. But if you place it just behind the shoulder point, then it will be very discreet. So that's why I really recommend that. Now that takes some figuring out, because you have to, you know, divide the neckband into equal quarters, because it should be shorter than the neckline, and you have to make that match up, and it will be slightly you know, adjusted, because you don't have 4 midpoints. But I guess it sounds very abstract, but the good news is that I've done an extensive blog post over at my website thelaststitch.com, actually 2 I think, where I talk about this. You can actually see it in practice when I'm sewing a girly top during the sew along. So I know this sounds super confusing right now, but I will explain that much better in the blog post that I will be able to do in this video. But as I said, definitely considering placing the neckband seam slightly behind the shoulder seam, because if you look at any type of knit garment that are made in a factory or in a professional settings, you will see that, I would say 9 out of 10 times, again 9 out of 10 times, I keep saying that, but you will see that the neckband is placed slightly on the back piece. So definitely consider that if you haven't already, and of course check out my tutorial where I show exactly all these things that I'm talking about in this video. And one thing I also want to talk about is the fact that the length of the neckband might depending on what type of fabric you're using. And in the instruction for the girly knit top, I show this. And so sometimes if you're, for instance, using a very soft rib knit that doesn't have a lot of spandex or nothing, which is the case with this particular neckband, then it's actually good to make it slightly shorter, because it will expand and not bounce back when you're sewing it, so you don't want it to end up gaping. And it's hard to give any exact numbers, but I have some suggestions in the instruction of the girly knit top, so that's good to check that out. Anyways, now I'm going to attach the neckband, and fingers crossed it's going to work out. This is definitely a tricky fabric, very soft. Hopefully it will work out well. Who knows, it's going to be a bit of a denture, but if something goes wrong right now, we're doing this together live, so that means we can evaluate and see. Also, I have some tips to fix neckbands that has gone wrong. So if we're lucky, maybe something will go wrong, so I can show you some tips on how to fix it. So I thought maybe we should take a look at the neckband and see if it turned out all right, because as I mentioned, this fabric is a soft rib cotton knit without any spandex, so it's extremely supple. It doesn't have great recovery, which makes sewing a neckband definitely a little bit risky, right? So honestly, I have to say that I think it turned out pretty well. A couple of tiny nitpicking is the fact that because it's so hard to stretch evenly, because it's so soft and supple, I think that the neckband at some parts got a little bit more narrow compared to other parts, but that's honestly just nitpicking. Because honestly, I've sewn like so many neckbands, hundreds probably, and I have to say I still struggle a little bit. So it's not easy. So definitely, oh, I dropped a pin there. Overall, I honestly think I did a pretty good job with the neckband. What do you think? Well, drop me your comment in the comment section about your experience with neckband, and of course you have more tips and opinions on the best way of sewing neckbands on knit tops. Alright, now I have attached the sleeves into the armhole, but the side seam and the inner seam of the sleeve is still open. That's the way you should attach knit garments in, I would say, pretty much any case, which means that you first attach the sleeves to the arm opening and then you just sew the side seam in one continuous seam, starting from the hem and going all the way to the top. Now something happened that was actually something I should have done a bit differently, so I thought I should talk about that. So in a way, a bit of a bummer, but a good learning experience. That is that, as I talked about earlier, this fabric is a really soft cotton rib knit with no spandex, so it's gonna grow. And as I said, I shortened the neckband a bit to accommodate for that, but I forgot to do that about the cuffs. So as you can see now here on the cuff, it's actually a little bit bigger than the pattern has designed it for, which means that I should have also shortened the cuffs to accommodate for the fact that I'm working with such a soft rib knit. So great learning experience, because then I can share it with you as well. Honestly, I won't change it because it doesn't really matter as much, it's just a couple of centimeters. But as I should have been consistent when I altered the neckband, I should definitely also have shortened the cuffs. But yeah, well, you live and you learn. So I thought it was a good actually thing that it happened, because that means I can talk about the importance of understanding that different knit fabrics have very different properties. So you often have to do small adjustments on the pattern just to accommodate for that. So there's no guarantee that every fabric will behave the same way just because it's a knit fabric. The Gurli top is done. Now, this was a really quick project. Actually, it just took me a few hours, despite the fact that I was also filming this stuff with you guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Perhaps you learned some new tricks. And of course, if you have any other tips that you want to share or some revelations you had watching this video, please share in the comment section. And if you're curious about the Gurli sewing pattern, well, that information you will find in the description section of this video. It was really fun sewing this together with you, and if you want me to do more videos like this in the future, I will definitely be open to it. So please ask away about suggestions, other projects that you would like to follow me along while I'm sewing. And I wish you a lovely day and happy sewing. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.